normal. It doesn't occur in the normal person. So that being said, again, this exercise that you're going to do with Bill is to go through this section of the book and ask these questions. Did I feel like Bill? Did I drink like Bill? Did I think like Bill? Okay? You're not coming into the doctor's opinion. Tell them this. When you come into the doctor's opinion or Bill's story, it's not about the stock market. It's not about World War I. It's not about Winchester Cathedral. It's not about playing golf with Walter Hagen. It's about, did I have problems with alcohol? It starts on the second page. He fails his law exam. He's drinking day and night. So it's like, if you're looking at that coming into it and looking at these 4 ideas, prayers, promises, warnings, and directions, if you're coming into Bill's story with those questions in a newcomer's mind, as he goes through this, it's going to make more sense to him. You understand? Otherwise, it's about, some guy in 1939 that lost his ass in the stock market and learned how to play golf. It doesn't have anything to do with AA. But if you ask these questions, Mike, about how it was fun, how it was about hanging out with the boys in Venice, how it was a way to connect to your peers, how it was a way when you didn't have family around you to get a connection and love, and then how it started to be something where you started to do it by yourself, and how eventually it detoured your entire life. You've got to realize that for most of us, when we had that first drink or that first drug, that was the most significant event in our entire lives. Before that, our parents were dropping us off at school. We were going to be a fireman and a baseball player. And all of a sudden, we got high, and it was like, we just turned. The whole course of our life turned. And so it was. The most significant event in an alcoholic's life is the first time he gets that sensation. A sensation that's so elusive that suddenly he cannot differentiate the true from the false. And it's taken till this day to realize that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to reverse that process a little bit. And that's part of the sanity that takes place here. It's not just the insanity of knowing that alcohol is poison, but that if I change some basic ideas and attitudes and beliefs in my life, that I can become empowered again. So we're right in the middle of Bill's story. We're going to start with that right now. But you guys, I mean, if you've asked the questions coming into Bill's story, did I drink like Bill? Did I feel like Bill? Did I think like Bill? That's basically the ideas you want to find out as you go through this. So we're going to keep going. Okay, we're going to start on page 8, where he says, "Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me up for a bit." Now, this is the first of 3 ideas that you're also looking at. Will fear keep you sober? Getting a 3rd strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing your career, all of those ideas. It works for a very short period of time. And for a problem drinker, it may work. But for a true alcoholic that has this spiritual maladjustment, the fear, it's like Evel Knievel. Mm-hmm. All the times that he broke his arms and legs, all he could think about is the one time when he made it and he felt like God. Okay. And people showered him with champagne and the chicks took him to the hotel room, and it's like, that's all he could think about. He can't think about the fear, see? Right? Yeah. Very important. Then came the insidious insanity of the first drink on Armistice Day, 1934. I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up in somewhere or stumble along to a miserable end. Now, a lot of people are shut up right now. That's what the sober living is. They're shut up somewhere. That's pretty much it. This is where they get stuck. They're stuck there for years.
I've been there for almost 12 months.
Okay, now I'm not judging. No, it might be damage control. I don't know.
I don't think it's good for me. I'm just saying that's what's happening.
Well, no, but let's do the work. If you do the work, you may never have to go back there again.
That's what I want.
Okay? So it says, or stumble onto a miserable end, how dark it is before the dawn. And it says the reality was that was the beginning of my last debauch. Okay? I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the 4th dimension of existence, okay? The 4th dimension is it also has to do with time. It's a 6th sense. It's an alternate reality. It's a different way of looking at life. It's a complete shift in perception, okay? And I'll tell you right now, we're going ahead. Ideas, attitudes, and emotions that are once the guiding force of alcoholics are suddenly cast to one side, and a whole new set of conceptions begin to dominate them. If you think that can happen from sitting in an AA meeting, I think you're wrong. I think you have to do some of this work to have that happen. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness. So now he's got purpose, okay, in a way that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. Okay, this is like when you have a lot of booze in the house. You know, you don't care. I was telling Gina, I was telling my girlfriend the other morning, I told her, she's going on a 12-hour shift, right? And I'm thinking, God, if I was still using, I just couldn't wait for you to leave.
Oh, that feeling.
Yeah, she's going to be gone for 12 hours. I'm going to party my ass off. Okay? So that's what Bill's thinking. I had certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through the night and the next day. My wife was at work. There it is. She's going to work. Okay? I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. Right? She might find it. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. How exciting, right? It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. Now remember, this is Ebby Thatcher. This is a guy he got loaded with. He drank with him. So he knows that this guy, it's like a picture is worth 1,000 words. When me and Mike think about walking down the street loaded 25 years ago, you know what I mean? When all that mattered was just getting high, just getting drunk.
It's been
25 years. It's like you think about that and you see that guy and you think, dude, what happened? It's like, when did you get out? You think you just got out of prison? It's like, I've been out for years. I'm doing this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what was going through Bill's mind right here. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped, right? Right? How do you get out, bro? Because all we want to do, right, we're party animals, okay? Of course, he would have dinner, then I would drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare, okay? I thought only of recapturing, this is Bill's selfishness, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days, right? Going back to when it worked, when it was fun, okay? There was a time we chartered an airplane to complete a jag. Now remember, I don't care what anyone says, I did the research. Bill Wilson was not a bum. People that charter airplanes to finish it drunk, they got money.
Yeah.
Okay? Towns Hospital in 1935 cost $350. That's 18 times the value today. So it was about $6,500 a week. Yeah. Multiply that by 4, because that's when cigarettes were 5 cents, when gas was 5 cents a gallon. So to come up with $350, someone had money. Okay? His coming over was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing an oasis. Drinkers are like that. The door opened, and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into this fellow. He wasn't himself. So there's a transformation that, again, he sees. The picture is greater than 1,000 words here, because he knew what this guy was like. You know what I mean? There's a visceral experience when you see somebody that you used to get loaded with. You know what I'm saying?
Attraction rather than promotion?
Yeah, it's totally that. It's totally that. He didn't even have to sell it. Come on, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me and simply, but smiling, he said, I've got religion. Now this is a weird thing, but I'm going to send you guys some stuff from William James about what the spiritual experience used to be called. Yeah. Before it was called a spiritual experience, it was called a conversion experience. Now you got to understand, we're not trying to convert you guys into religious zealots, but we're trying to convert you from seeking alcohol as a power to seeking a spiritual power, to seeing that your way up to this point has failed and being open-minded to a new way. That's all. This is a very practical way to a spiritual experience, but it was at that time a kind of a conversion experience. We're going to see what we can do about changing the wording a little bit so it makes sense to you guys, that it'll be attractive to you. Because if you take booze away from a drunk and you don't give him something better, There's no way you're going to stay. And that's what this is about. It's about you having such a powerful experience with this that you won't ever want to look back that way. Not that you can't. Believe me, there's a beer right there. I don't want it. I want the ice cream. I don't want the beer. You know what I mean? Because I know that that won't create the experience for me that I've had through this process. I've had a deep and effective spiritual experience. And that's what this is about. So he says, I've got religion. I was a guest. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspect a little cracked about religion. All right? He had that starry look. Yeah, yes, the old boy was on fire. You know, it's like, okay, Joel Osteen walked into his house, right? But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my liquor would last longer than his preaching. Okay?
Does your book actually say liquor? Or does it say gin?
Yeah, I just...
Oh, no, I'm just making sure it's not a different version.
Gin's good. Gin's good. But no, it says gin.
Okay.
I just...
No worries.
Yeah, you could say crack is fine. For, you know, it might be, you know, I got an ounce of meth,
Nice
dude.
big bag.
Okay, whatever it is for you, whatever your poison is.
Satchel.
Yeah. Dude, I've been there. I've been there. Imagine sitting on $100,000 and a couple of good connections. You know, why would you ever leave? Now you got Uber, you got, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But still, for me, like we were having this discussion before, if it was free and it was $5 a gram, like in South America, they're miserable, bro. They're freaking miserable, Mike. They're walking on all filthy and dirty, even though they have money, it's just a dirty lifestyle. Mm-hmm. You if you think you have a reservation, you need to keep thinking about that. That's like the brother of death. There's nothing. None of those people were smiling. You know, we were talking about a dope house in South America where it's legal and there's 50 people lined up. And we were talking about why Mike was late.
Oh, yeah.
And how Mike would have been early if we had had a big chart and, you know what I mean, a couple
yeah. I would have been out here at dark.
He'd have been here in the morning.
Yeah.
He'd have been camped out by yeah, okay, so.
Dirty fingernails.
Yeah, so he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he had two men had appeared in court. This was the prelude to what we call now alternative sentencing, where the treatment center comes to jail and tells the judge they'll take care of you, right? So they can make money off you. And the judges are complicit in that deal, where they say you have to stay here for 6 months, and the like sober living owners going cha-ching.
Seriously.
6 months, $4,500 a month. I just made $25,000. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Persuading the judge to suspend his commitment, they told of a simple religious idea, okay? We'll call it a spiritual idea, and a practical program of action. That's the steps. An idea and the steps. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked, okay? That's it. Real simple. That's the presentation. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested, for I had to be. I was hopeless. Are you hopeless? Here's the question. Has everything you've tried up to this point failed you?
That's the Socratic method. That's the Socratic method where you're turning a statement into a question while reading it to a new.
All the way through this.
Absolutely.
All the way through this.
Cool, right?
Prayers, promises, warnings, and directions. Now you're going to start, as we go through the next 7 pages, you're going to see the directions. You're going to see the prayers. You're going to see the warnings. Now, it doesn't come up everywhere in the book, but when it comes up, it is like dynamite, okay? He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat still on Sunday. So, you know, Bill has a huge amount of resistance, okay? The real truth, and I know this is being recorded. I've got a document that I got from some friends down south. Abby actually came to Bill's house. The true story is Bill's story was originally 40 pages. It was edited to 16. Abby actually came to Bill's house 4 times. Bill threw him out, drunk. Get out of here. I don't want to hear about your God. Yeah. And the 4th time, so he tried. He worked on him. He kept working with him. He didn't just bail on him. He knew, man, Bill's dying. This great, amazing stock speculator's dying in this house. You know what I mean? I have friends like this. I worked out what he ended up killing himself. One of my best friends. He was like, you know what I mean? I kept trying to help this guy and he didn't make it. But it's like, you know, Abby tried to help Bill. Ebby came back with Roland Hazard, who was part of the Oxford group. That was the 5th visit, and then Bill conceded, and that's how this really happened. So this is what's going on here. So way over there on the hillside, there was the proffered temperance pledge. I never signed. This is like the olden days when they had prohibition. That's what this was. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres really had their music. In other words, there was a divine order. There was a divine order in the universe.
Spheres?
It's an old idea about the spheres. I think it has something to do with the planets.
Music of the spheres.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's a way of
Like angelic
explaining the
voices.
universe. It's like
Yeah.
a medieval way of explaining
Right.
the universe.
But his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he dies. These recollections welled up from the past and made me swallow hard. So Bill was a sensitive guy. Bill was very sensitive. I'll tell you more about Bill Wilson later. Bill was a seeker. Bill did Ouija boards. Bill wanted to communicate with the other side. Bill later in his life got into vitamin B therapy and nutrition. Bill was an interesting guy. There's a lot more to Bill than what you know.
Acid.
Well, he did, but he didn't know at that time in the 40s and 50s when they started. Yeah, but he didn't know, man. It was a way to tap into the consciousness.
Yeah.
You
It
know?
really is.
Yeah, they made me swallow hard. That wartime day at the old Winchester Cathedral came back, which was a time when he felt the presence of God. In the beginning of the story, I've asked many people what this meant because I kept asking people. When I don't understand something, I keep asking old timers, what does that mean? What does that mean? There's people around the country that really have, done a lot of research on this. I don't know if you guys have ever felt a presence. I have. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I have felt it. Okay, that's what he's talking about. I had always believed in a power, notice it's capitalized, greater than myself. I have often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, okay? For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that the universe originates in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere, right? And then there was a giraffe, which doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? It's like if it's like all about nothing and then suddenly there's this majestic species on this planet, right? Come on, it must have evolved from something. There's divine order in everything. Okay? And what we do as alcoholics is we fight that order. That's the problem. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlie it all. How could there be so much precise and immutable law? If anything, if you can just start to focus on that, the precise and immutable law in the universe, gravity, inertia, centrifugal force, the basic functions of electricity, you know what I mean, atomic structure, all those things we understand and we can explain, but most people can't. A lot of these things have to do with that power. If that is enough for you, that there's an order in the universe, and that order might be God will steer, but God won't row.
Right.
Maybe you can ask His power for strength and direction and nothing more. That would be a good start. If you're just asking God for strength and direction, that's all. That's all it has to be right now. Later on, like I tell people, if you get in the closet and pray for a hot dog, you'll die. My friend said, don't pray for women. God's not a pimp, right? It's like, but we have a distorted idea about God, and maybe it's just based on some simple ideas. So we'll start with some fundamental ideas.
Or like that great saying about the dude's there's a flood and he climbs up to the top of the building.
Right,
and,
exactly.
The dude comes by in a boat and he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to help.
And then the guy goes by in a helicopter,
He's
right?
like, no, I'm waiting for God, and then he drowns, and God's like, dude, I sent you a boat and a fucking helicopter.
Exactly.
Get your shit together.
Exactly. So that's the beginning of just recognizing it. All we're going to do, part of this is this process, believe it or not, is start to recognize.
God comes in a can of shoe polish. Somebody said that once.
To recognize the love, to recognize the camaraderie, to recognize the willingness in yourselves to come here today and just be open-minded. That's the beginning of it.
I needed relief. And I
Right.
knew that no matter what, I didn't like coming out here and I didn't like driving out here from Pasadena with a stick shift, but I'll feel better when I leave here today. That's the point.
So what does it say? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. Maybe that's the fourth dimension. Okay? But that was as far as I had gone. With the ministers, the world religions, I parted right there because he's talking about hypocrisy. Okay? He's going to talk about hypocrisy. In other words, he hears one thing and he sees something else. He hears the born-again Christians, but then he sees them throwing rocks at the Hare Krishnas. You know what I mean? He hears about the great things of Islam, and then he sees the World Trade Center. This is the type of stuff you see, right? I parted right there. When they talked of God's personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction. Remember what I just said, strength and direction? I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. Not too closely.
I love that line.
Isn't that funny?
It's one of my favorite lines
Yeah.
in the book, actually.
His moral teaching most excellent. For myself I had adopted the parts which seemed convenient to me and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. It's very interesting. If you get a chance, read Sermon on the Mount. If you get a chance, I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's something that was written by Emmett Fox, but it was a book that Dr. Bob read. And it kind of, what it does is it makes this person's life very practical. And it takes the religiosity out of Christ's life and shows you the very simple spiritual principles that he taught. Even if you look at it as philosophy, it will open your eyes. Look at it as a philosophy. Okay? The wars which have been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute has facilitated. More wars have been fought over religion than any other idea. Okay? Which really means that, like in New York, it's the Atlantic. Here it's the Pacific. In Chicago, it's Lake Michigan. But it's all water, see? So they're fighting about the name of the water. That's basically what they're fighting about. They're fighting about a label. But underneath it is like 5 basic ideas. One is life after death. One is altruistic service. You know, the common good of mankind. They all have these basic fundamental good ideas. Yet on top of it is control. Okay? So it made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religion of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and the sense, which means he came back and saw all that pain in the war, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there's a devil, he seemed to be boss universal, and he certainly had me. So that's where Bill's at. He just explained to you all of the reasons why he has a prejudice against God. If you really look at it, these are all the walls that Bill had built up. See it? There it is. But my friend, now he makes a huge transition. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Now ask yourself, has your human will failed? Has it failed? When it comes to this, has it failed?
Getting high when you really don't want to.
Yes. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. I'd been pronounced incurable. I was on methadone maintenance for 10 years. They said, you're going to be on methadone the rest of your life. We can make sure that, you have a special card and that you can be here for. We'll give you long-acting methadone. You're either that or you're going to be in institutions. And I accepted that. I'm like, okay. I was like a big step up for me. I'm finally going to get a take-homes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I get to take some home. You know what I mean? On the weekends.
You're.
Yeah, right, exactly. The big
shit.
step up. That was like the highest achievement that I could get as a 30-year-old man. Society was about to lock me up, right? Was society about to lock you up? Absolutely. I'd been locked up for years. I spent 17 years locked up. Every time I got out, I would kill myself, and then they would drag me back and lock me up again, and then I'd do good. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Okay, step 1, right here. Okay? Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the strapped heap of life to a life better than the best he'd ever known. Now, I can attest to that for me, this is a really good life. It's a spiritual life. It's got nothing to do with the outside. It's got to do with my relationships with people, my purpose in life. You know what I mean? It's a good life. So that is going to be some of these questions. And then it says, had this power originated in him? No. Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. He's looking at this guy. But why is this guy okay? And I'm sitting here thinking about the jinn, and I can't stop. So that's the question. He's comparing himself right now. Okay? So when you look at a newcomer, there's got to be a sense of gratitude that that's not you. I mean, that he's got the claw in him, that newcomer. We've been released from that claw. I don't want to be under that claw again, Mike. You know what I'm talking about, right? That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Now, later on, we're going to look at what is right about religion. Not all of it is, okay? But we're going to look at the things that they do. They have a sense of community. They have a sense of goodwill. Part of the word spiritual is ritual, okay? So a lot of things we do in recovery, believe it or not, if you were to take a church and you were to use the church in the 12 traditions, our common welfare comes first, our church depends on our unity. For our church's purpose, we have a loving God. The only requirement is to be a member of the church. You'll see it. It's right there. Any group. But we're not in church. Church couldn't save me. I can't talk about chasing women and riding Harleys and effing shit up in church. But here it's like, really? How'd that go for you? Right? We relate to that stuff. Okay? So this is the place we can. All right? So it began to look at like religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart, in Ebby's heart, okay? Which had done the impossible, okay? And have you guys seen that in people in AA? Now, I know that if you didn't get high with someone or drink with them, you probably think, oh, he probably fell off a bar stool. He probably not like me. Because that's what I think. I immediately think these guys are a bunch of lames. You know what I mean? They're not like me. If they had my pain, but I don't believe that, because when you hear their stories, sometimes you think, wow, man, that guy was just awful, and he's got a great life. So that's it. So my ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. See, no one had seen what Bill's seeing. At that time in history, very few alcoholics made this right about face. You see what I'm saying? Now it's commonplace. We don't even appreciate, oh, we get 10 years. What's going on with the Dodgers? But for a guy, like I said when I was speaking in Reno, I said, if you don't believe in life after death, look around this room. Because a lot of us were on death's door.
Yeah.
We really were. And we've averted death. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. Okay? I saw that my friend was... Now, this is a really important statement here. He was as much inwardly reorganized. That's what it's going to take, guys. It's going to take an inward reorganization to recover, okay? He was on different footing. His roots grasped new soil. If you learn about Ebby Thatcher, and I have some information, he comes from a long line of mayors in New York. These guys were really wealthy people, very successful people. But he got arrested for shooting birds out of like a tree in his mom's house. That's what he was doing in court. He was like shooting birds out, probably because they were like driving him crazy. He was probably smoking crack, bro.
He was painting houses and they were shitting on his paint job.
Is that what it was?
And he
got
drunk on the job and started shooting them in the neighborhood with a shotgun.
Makes perfect sense.
The neighborhood, I think it was upstate New York, where they don't have that kind of shit.
Trying to do a good job.
Yeah.
Paint job. You didn't want to shoot the birds.
You know, the fact that he was up in the morning, he's probably, okay, so anyway. So it says, despite the living example my friend remained in, there remained in me, Bill Wilson, the vestiges of my old prejudice, okay? So he's holding on to these old ideas. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal in me, this feeling was intensified. So he has these ideas about a punishing God, a condemning God, a hypocritic God, maybe a Santa Claus God. And those are a Santa Claus, you know what that means, right? If I'm a good person, I should get a parking space.
Or Land Rover, yeah.
And a friend of mine said, he goes, you know, he said he thought if he was honest at work, people would be honest with him, and it didn't happen. He thought if he was loyal to his wife, she'd be loyal to him. It didn't happen. But what happened is he became an honest man. He became a loyal man. So the point is, honor is a gift that a man gives himself. That will change within us, and later the world will change based on that.
That's awesome.
But the change has to begin within me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Okay, I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence. I love how creative he is here. Universal mind. Spirit of nature. But I resisted the thought of a czar in the heavens. In other words, a controlling God. You see? Very interesting. So in some ways, if you look at like the types of comparative theology and the way that we term theological, there's a thing called a deist, which is you believe in a higher power, a supreme being, but a deist doesn't necessarily believe in an interventionist God. And that's kind of what I've come to understand. In other words, God protects me from nothing but supports me in everything. And that was a statement that Herb K made in one of his workshops where he said that you've got all these things going on. You got biology, right? So if your dad dies of cancer, you're like this. It's like biology. You've got plate tectonics and geology. Things happen all the time. There's earthquakes, right? You've got human error. That happens all the time. People go across the yellow line, planes crash, and we want to blame God on every one of those instances. Oh, God took your kids to a better place. It's like, really? I don't buy that. But you understand that when it says later in the book, the fundamental idea of God is within every man, woman, and child, it says it's obscured by three things: pomp, calamity, and worship. And what happens is you start to take those three words apart, and you look at calamity. When that happens, how consciously or subconsciously you might separate from God. Or worship of money or women or power, right? Money, property, prestige. How that can divert you, right? Or pride or intellectual pride or self-importance, right? So these are the things that block us and obscure us from a relationship with a power that makes sense. I know, do you guys want to take 5 minutes? We can take 5 minutes, you guys have a cigarette, and then, and then we'll continue. Sure. Can you restart it?
I'm going to pause.
What then seemed to be a novel idea. He suggested, why don't you choose your own conception of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain whose shadow I had lived in and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. So this was a very pivotal moment for him. Your own conception. Something that makes sense to you. Okay? A concept that makes sense. So one of the big problems and obstacles with alcoholics is omnipotence, a need to play God. Every time I'm in spiritual pain, it usually is because I'm not getting my way. And that's something that, when you start to recognize that, you'll be able to make this shift back to this idea.
Question, just quick question.
Go ahead.
Our own conception of God, but we also hear about these other guys in the first 100, Jim Burwell or whoever, who insisted that the steps be changed to add as we understand it. But if this is what happened to Bill at first, why?
Well, your own conception, that's self-evident. That's self-evident. Your own conception and as you understand them, it's yours.
I'm not sure
it's
that
no one else.
I'm not sure Bill was against that idea either.
But didn't he write it without, as we understood him at first, him and Parkhurst? And they had to change
I think they were basing it sort of off of the six, I don't remember what they were called in the Oxford group, but the 6 steps or whatever. And so they probably used phrasing from there.
Exactly.
And it was just suggested that they modify it.
Thank God.
Yeah, right.
Well, as I understand it.
Of course.
Weren't there 4 steps that got extended to 12?
It was like surrender, catharsis, restitution, and service, and then it evolved to that. Yeah, I'll tell you all about that. We're going to get there. So I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than, or I would say other than, myself. Okay? Nothing more was required to make a beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. So that's another third step idea. Okay? Thus I was convinced God is concerned with us humans when we want Him enough. At long last, I believed, scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes, a new world came to view. So this is a shift, a perception shift with him. Okay? And it's based on alcoholic destruction. That he had to come. You come to believe in a power greater than yourself by default. Because self-reliance fails. It's just like the prodigal son. He's cleaning slop up in a pigsty, and someone says, aren't you the son of the king? You could be cleaning his horses and do better than this. Why don't you go and ask your dad? So that's the idea. There's a great story in AA about a guy that gets a watch from his father, and his father dies. And he's got this watch, and he can't get it to work. And he goes to every watchmaker in the town to try to get this watch to work, and he can't get it to work. And one day he's got what's called a loop, which is what jewelers use. And he sees this scratch on the watch, and he looks at it, And he really looks closely, and what it says on the watch, it says, "When in trouble, return to Maker." And that's the idea with this, that he comes to believe by default because everything else has failed him. And that's what we're asking you guys. Has everything else failed you? Has treatment failed you? Sober living, Suboxone, Subutex, has it all failed you? Why don't you just try this as an experiment? If it doesn't work, we'll refund your misery. But go through the whole process. Go through the whole process. So, thus God was concerned with us when we wanted him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed, scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes, a new world came into view. The real significance of my experience at the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There I had been humbly willing to have him with me. That's the third step for him, okay? And he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors. This is again what he says about pomp, calamity, and worship. These are the things that block us. Most of those within myself. They are within himself. And so it has been ever since, how blind I had been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. All of us have been separated at this point, right? We're separated. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremors. Okay? There I humbly offered myself to God. This is actually the third step. And then as I then understood him. There it is, Bart. Okay? To do with me as he would. Now that's the third step prayer. Relieve me of the bondage of do with me as I will. There it is. Okay? I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. Okay? My friend Mickey says when you take your Mercedes to the Mercedes dealer for him to take care of, you don't give it to him. You turn your thoughts and your actions over to the care of this process so that you can develop a relationship or to get, you know what I mean? I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing. Okay, this is huge right here. This is huge. Now this is where I go, if I were you guys, when I do this thing with the bedevilments with a guy, I'll ask him, when you're not drinking, are you still having trouble with personal relationships? When you're not drinking, are you still a prey to misery and depression? When you're not drinking, are you still having trouble controlling your emotional nature? When you're not drinking, are you still full of fear? If they answer those questions, and I say with all your experience and your education, you still can't resolve these problems, don't you see that you need a God? You need a power. And there's corners. You're basically cornering them with this logic. And that will propel them into a fourth step. Because when we get to that point, we're going to be on the verge of moving through that part of the process. And we'll get there. So those are the questions you're going to ask. So, of myself, I am nothing. I can't seem to manage this part of my life on my own. It's a yes or no question. I was lost. Without him, I was lost. Am I lost without a power in my life? That's the question. You have to ask yourself. If you can do it on your own, do it. We're not selling you anything here. It's really up to you to be at that place. I ruthlessly faced my sins. Now, the word sin is an archery term. It means to miss the mark. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's an archery term. We look at it as such a terrible thing. What it is the defects that I'm looking at. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. If you really look at what these are the things that block me from the power. Like I said in the beginning, there was that the four things that block me. Someone I will not forgive. That would be an example. A restitution I will not make. That would be considered a sin. A secret I will not confess. A dubious pleasure I will not forego. Those are the four. Okay, but he starts to look at these things. These are the things that are blocking him. We're not asking you guys to be saints, okay? But we're going to find out through a spiritual type of surgery what it is that's causing the pain. A lot of it is your need to play God. You know, if my woman would behave, my boss would behave, my family would do as I wanted. But if people have to change for me to be happy, my life's going to be miserable. Okay? So that's basically so he faced his sins and became willing to have his newfound friend, okay, this power, take them away root and branch. I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted with my problems and deficiencies. Now take a look at what that means. Problem and deficiency is 6 and 7. Because 6 is things I do that I shouldn't. 7 is things I don't do that I should. Same thing though. You see, that's what a shortcoming is. So take you through the steps backwards. If I'm stuck in step 9, the problem's never in 9. It's that I never made the list or I never became willing to forgive innate. So the problem's never innate. It's that I'm too selfish to make the amends, I'm too resentful to make the amends, I'm too dishonest because I don't want them to know what I did, or I'm too afraid for them to find out, which means the problem's never in 7, it's in 6. It's the actual defect of selfish, dishonest, resentful, afraid, which means the problem's never in 6, it's really in 5. It's never that I never put my finger on the weak items in my inventory. I never asked God to remove them. I never did the process of discovery. Why would that be? Because I never actually did a 4-step. I never got those things down on paper. So if the problem's in 4, it's never really in 4. Problem's in 3, that I didn't actually do an effective 3rd-step decision, which meant to put my will and my life down on paper, which means the problem's never in 3. Problem's actually in 2, that I never came to believe in a power other than myself because I still thought I could manage my life in 1. So that's what the process is here. Wilson says here, see, God can't use a man until he comes to the end of himself. And Bill Wilson said it, of myself I am nothing. So he came to the end of himself. He just said, I need your help and direction. That's all. All you're asking for right now is strength and direction to do the rest of the steps. That's it. You don't have to believe in hocus pocus, an anthropomorphic God. You don't have to believe in religion. Just trust this process right now and see what happens. So he made a list of people who he had hurt and whom he had resentment. 4-step. He expressed his willingness to approach these individuals, admitting his wrong. Now, Wilson will use the word wrong and defect interchangeably. If you look at the 2nd paragraph in chapter 6, it says, admitted to God, to myself, and another human being the exact nature of my defect. It doesn't say wrongs. So now, that means when I go to 10, I continue to take personal inventory, and when I'm in defect, I admit it. So now I'm starting to search for these defects. And watch, what the word he uses for search is test. Watch what he says. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to right all such matters, okay? To the utmost of my ability. That's his 9th step, okay? I was to test my thinking. That's 10. 10 is the spot check test throughout the day. It's not the end of the day. It's to test his thinking by the new God consciousness within. There it is. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt. What do you think that is? 11th step. It's right there. Look what it says. Asking only for direction and strength. So what is God giving you? 2 things. Direction and strength. Not a supermodel, not a Mercedes, not a job. Direction and strength. That's all I'm asking for. Look how practical this is. It's so practical. To meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself. See? So sought through prayer and meditation, praying only for knowledge of his will for us. To be kind, to be loving, to be supportive, to be cooperative. If I know what God's will is, to be kind, to be supportive, to be loving, to be helpful, I'm never confused about God's will is. He doesn't care if I'm a stockbroker or a plumber. My sponsor said, if you watch kids playing in a playground, and some are on the slides, some are on the swings, some are on the merry-go-round, do you care what they play on? You just don't want them like embezzling money from each other, blocking them from the rides, throwing them off the top of the slide, right? So it's like God's will is very simple. Be kind, be helpful, be supportive in your life. Be nice to the people you're around. Okay? That's it. Never was I to pray for myself, except when my request bore my usefulness to others. So you can pray for a Mercedes if you promise to take other people to meetings. Whatever. Okay.
So where's step 12 in all of this?
Wait.
Okay.
Wait. Then I might expect to receive, and that would be in great measure. So there's the first 11. Abby promised when these things were done, I would enter into a new relationship with my Creator. Okay? Now look, you remember, promises, prayers, warnings, and directions. Remember what you're looking at here. There's a bunch of directions you just heard. Okay? There's some prayers that you just heard there. Okay? When in doubt, asking for direction. That's a prayer. You see what I'm saying? Think about it, what it is. Prayers, promises, warnings, and directions. Okay? I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. That's a promise. Okay? Belief in the power of God plus willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were essential requirements. Okay? Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. That might be a warning. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Look at how perfect he writes this stuff. It's good, isn't it? I think it's great. It's exciting. I must turn all things over to the Father of light, dude. You got to admit, he's got some progressive words for God. I love it. Progressive.
I love his use of language, like in general.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people say it's like antiquated or too complicated, but like I really like it.
I know a guy, his higher power's name's Harold. You heard that one?
No.
I go, why is your higher power named Harold? He goes, Our Father who art in heaven, Harold be thy name.
Bam.
Okay. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up. Now you got to realize, stop for a second. He just did some work. It wasn't like he read the paragraph and was electrified. Bill did some work in there. He admitted his defects, his problems, deficiencies. He made a list of people he'd harmed. He did the work. If you look at the last two paragraphs, there's a lot of work in there he did. That was just a summary of what he did. Okay, it's a great summary of the steps, but he did the work. Okay? So he was lifted up. He felt a clean wind from a mountain blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but what his impact was sudden and profound. Okay? For a moment I was alarmed. I called my friend the doctor. That's Silkworth. He called the hospital. I don't know what's happened to me, right? Okay, to ask him. And he listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, Something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were, Bart. Right? Isn't this better than the way you were?
Yes, it is.
Better than the way I was. How about you?
Definitely.
You're going to work. They're going to give you money, and you're not going to buy crack tonight.
I'm driving there. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, you have a car and a license.
A truck and a license, yes.
The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows they are real. Now listen, here you asked, where is the 12th step? While I lay in the hospital, a thought came to me. There were thousands of hopeless alcoholics like Bart who might be glad to have what I had been so freely given, right? So this is it. This was the revelation. This is a revelation. Okay? This is almost like direction from God. Perhaps I could help some of them. That's what I want you guys to realize. You, right now, are the new and triumphant alcoholics that are going to have this revelation right now. You might be able to help some. Guess where they are? They're at the Marina Center. They're at 26th and Broadway. Or they're at the Med Stag. They're coming in like fresh and new. They're in your neighborhood.
Boatloads.
They actually come to us. We don't have to go out and look for them. They come to us. You get 1,000 business cards for $20. You give away like 50 of them, and one guy will go through this process if you're lucky. Okay? They, in turn, might work with others. So it starts to duplicate itself. That's how Alcoholics Anonymous became this mega thing that it is. I mean, this is one of the largest social movements of the last century. It's affected the lives of somewhere between like 30 to 40 million people worldwide through all the cousin and sister programs. And this is how it started. So this was his idea. It's going to talk about some real important statements here. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs, right? Step 12? Doesn't that sound like step 12? Particularly is imperative imperative means absolutely necessary, right? That to work with others as he had worked with me, right? So didn't you hear what he did? Ebby did this work with him, right? He didn't just ask him to call him every day. He sat down and did some work. He admitted his problems and deficiencies. He helped him make a list. He did what we're doing. We actually have a tool now that makes it more effective. We're going through this together, so we got a tool. We're just starting this, guys. We're going to go through this whole process. This will be done in 8 weeks. So if you got 8 weeks of your life to do this, I mean, it's a small price to pay. Hopefully some of these other guys will show up. So he said faith without works is dead, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. Warning. Remember? Prayers, promises, warnings, directions. Here's a huge warning. If Mike fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through what? Work and self-sacrifice for others. I could be taking stuff back at Bed Bath & Beyond right now. This is self-sacrifice for me. That's what it is. I'm sacrificing. Me and Gina we could have went to the Venetian today. She had like 2-day deal at the Venetian in Vegas. Pool, hot tub, all those great restaurants. Where am I with you guys? Right? Why?
Dick.
Why? I know, but guess what? I get to keep all my stuff. I would be at the Venetian getting loaded,
Oh yeah.
spending money on those tables. Very important that we are at this place, okay? You understand, Mike, what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you got to keep doing this. And what does it say? He could not survive the certain low spots ahead. So let's read that one more time. It is very important. If an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he cannot survive the certain low spots ahead. Do you know what a low spot is? It's getting dumped by your girlfriend. It's finding out your dad just died. It's finding out you just got cancer. It's getting your car wrecked. It's getting hit on your motorcycle. It's losing your job. Those are the certain low spots that happens to everybody. Does that make sense? So when the shit hits the fan, okay, if you're not in the middle, that's why we say the view from Alcoholics Anonymous is totally different from the middle than from the outside. You could fall off the edge, you can't fall off the middle. So in other words, for you to survive those certain low spots, you better be in the middle. My buddy goes, I only need 2 meetings a week. You know what the problem is? I don't know which ones they are. So he goes every day. Okay? So all this work right here is only as good as going to meetings and doing service work. On top of this is just the foundation of it. Does that make sense? And then he said if he did not work, he would surely drink again. If he drank, he would surely die. Remember, the more you miss meetings, the more you miss drinking. That's the way it works. The more you miss meetings, the more you miss drinking. Then faith would be dead indeed, and it is just like that. My wife and I abandon ourselves. Listen, are you willing to abandon yourself with enthusiasm the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution to their problems? That's my sponsor said, if you're not willing to do that, there's no point in coming back next week. Abandon yourself to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution, okay? Now listen to this very important statement. It was fortunate for my old business associates to remain skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. Now, why would that be fortunate? Because if he had got a big business deal in his first year and a half, if he had put his job in front of AA and got a big stack of cash, we'd be in a treatment center right now. We'd be like, we wouldn't be here.
A psych ward.
Yeah, so think about that. So it was fortunate that he didn't make any money. He said, I didn't make any money for my first year and a half. I put all my work into AA. What did it say? I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. It's huge. Self-pity and resentment. I feel sorry for myself. Everyone else has got a big house and a hot girlfriend, and I'm in sober living. I might as well get loaded. Right? Right? Okay. This was sometimes nearly drove him back to drinking. But you know what he found? I found that when all other measures failed, Bart asked about the 12th step. Look how much work he's put into the 12th step. Work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking with another man, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. Now, a design for living, does that last a lifetime? Absolutely. It's a design for living. It's a way of life. It's a roadmap to spiritual success. Okay? This doesn't end. All right? We're almost done. We got a paragraph and a half, and you guys will be released into the community. Okay?
Unleashed.
Yes. Yes, to wreak havoc. We commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have. Even under pressure and difficulty, I have seen hundreds of families set on their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. I have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. So a lot of the things that you think might be blocking you from right now, we say in AA, our problems die from neglect. A lot of the things that you focus on, like if I were to ask Bart, what was your biggest problem on the 11th of November last year? I have no idea. Do you? We might have been sitting in this room. I have seen men come out of asylums. I've seen Mike come out of an asylum and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities.
A couple times.
Business and professional men have regained their standing, okay? There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome amongst us. In one western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. Okay, now this is a forecast of how AA will grow. We meet frequently. Now listen, this is why, now if you ever ask why we go to meetings, remember, it's on the bottom of page 15. It says, we meet frequently, so, and why do we come to meetings? So newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. Remember what I said about the chips? You think the chips are for the new guy? They're so you can help him. Okay? That's why we go to meetings, so we can help them. All right? At these informal gatherings, we may often find 50 to 200 persons. That's true today. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cups or in his pipe is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. That happens. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. It's like, that's a quick transition, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Kill
hey.
itself, but it's a good time.
Yeah, you know, Mike died.
There
But,
is. The fellowship is
what's
tragic,
going on
but
with
it's
the
also
Dodgers?
fun.
Yeah.
The fellowship can be fun.
I suppose some of us will be shocked at our seemingly worldliness and levity, but just underneath there's a deadly earnestness. Is there a deadly earnestness? Faith has to work 24 hours a day in us and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need to look no further for utopia. We have it right with us here and now. So that's the question. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. So, you know, the question is, can you widen this circle? And do you see the prayers, promises, warnings, and directions in that second half of Bill's story? You might want to go through it with a highlighter. I mean, that's an exercise you can do.